I think that they were trying to find answers, ontological answers, that to like who we are. Where do we come from? What is out there? Can we find out? Can we connect with it? Can we bring this knowledge back into our world? Can it help us develop? Can it help us with innovations and technology? Can these spirits guide us?
Hello and welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. Today we welcome the brilliant Andrew Collins to dive into his astonishing new book on Karahan Tepe. This ancient site in Turkey has fascinated me for years, and Andrew's research takes its significance to a whole new level. We explore the origin of myths, the symbolism of serpents and birds as depicted at Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe, and the potential relationship with the Milky Way. Andrew shares his incredible insights from his journeys to Karahan Tepe and the nearby sites, which are revealing more and more about the sophistication of the ancient people who created them. We also discuss some of the big questions around humanity's past, from the Watchers and Nephilim to the Yazidi black snake and the cosmic serpent myths found across cultures. Andrew ties it all together with his thoughts on cosmic cycles, cataclysmic events, and their influence on spiritual practice. In the Plus section, we dive into the historical and mythological significance of the Garden of Eden. Andrew shares his theory that the garden was in fact a real place and was located in eastern Turkey, identifying the 4 rivers mentioned in the Bible. He recounts local legends about Adam and Eve and connects the story's serpent to the Milky Way, the cosmic Milky Way serpent, and the stars of Scorpius. And to top it off, we also touch on Andrew's recent experience in Turkey, including a haunting jinn encounter at a cave tied to the goddess Ishara. Now, this encounter resulted in a mysterious photograph which can be found on Andrew's Instagram, the link of which you can find in the show notes. It's really cool. You should definitely check it. That's very strange. So, anyway, let's get on with it. This conversation is packed with extraordinary revelations, thought-provoking ideas, and I loved every second of it. I think Andrew's book is absolutely fantastic. It's called Karahan Tepe, Civilization of the Anunnaki and the Cosmic Origins of the Serpent of Eden. So do check that out in the show notes below. It's the best book I've read in a long time, so do check it out. Now, if you want to hear the Plus show, simply go to the links below, follow the link tree, and come and join the Patreon. That's really it. And if you want to support me in a different way, then you can pick up a copy of my book, Song of the Dark Man, father of which is Lord of the Crossroads. If you like this podcast, you'll probably like the book. And right, let's get on with it. Andrew Collins, it's a pleasure to welcome you back to the Spirit Box. Lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, Tara. Yes, plenty to talk about today on this dark evening in the UK.
Yeah, it is pretty grim inside, outside rather. I've just finished your fabulous new book on Karahan Tepe. And really, before we're going to get into discussing, congratulations, fabulous book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
There was so much that you pulled together in this book. I won't hold it. I'll put a picture up on for people who are watching on YouTube because I've got blur on in the background and it just doesn't work. But it's really a tremendous read. You've pulled together some astonishing research, and really the site's incredible. It's incredible. I was at Göbekli Tepe back in 2013. And Haran and kind of in those areas, and just the picture you're painting of how much there is in that area is astonishing, truly astonishing. Anyway, I'm going to gather my thoughts a little bit and focus on the book and introing people to the book. Could you tell the audience a little bit about your work and about your latest title?
Yeah. I think for me, the story goes back to the dark evenings of 1995, actually, when I was writing a book called From the Ashes of Angels. Now, basically what this was to look at all of the myths and legends relating to these mythical beings of Hebrew myth, of Mesopotamian myth, Iranian myth, and others, and to see them potentially as not ethereal gods or as angels, but as flesh and blood human beings that were different to the peoples in the region that end up writing about them. And this region is southeastern to eastern Turkey, which is the traditional Garden of Eden. The four rivers of paradise were said to take their rise in Eden, and those four rivers can all be traced back to eastern Turkey. This is where the book of Genesis, if it was a real event, was played out. And of course, the story of the Watchers and the Nephilim, which is mentioned in Genesis but is brought out in greater detail in the book of Enoch and the book of Giants, is that these beings decided that they would go against their heavenly companions, and 200 of them decided to come down from a place called Mount Hermon and descend and take mortal wives. And these mortal wives gave birth to these giant babies called Nephilim, who then ran amok and had to be rounded up and killed. But well, they weren't all killed because they're mentioned later on in the Bible. But it was said that the Watchers gave to their mortal wives the rudiments of civilization, everything that they needed, for civilization to begin. And it's a similar story with the Anunnaki in Mesopotamian tradition. They also were said to be the gods, but they were human gods in the sense that they gave us animal husbandry, they gave us agriculture, they gave us irrigation, they helped us build the first cities. Again, not the sort of thing that that an ethereal being would do. The suggestion being is that these were an elite group coming into the region that helped kickstart civilization, probably at the end of the last ice age. That's what I suggested. Now, there was a lot of symbolism associated with the early Neolithic in this region, particularly to do with the vulture. The vulture was a really key symbol of life and death in the early Neolithic. And not only do we know that these people were wearing vulture wings, because wings have been found at various places. Plus, we got depictions of them at sites that I knew already from places like Çatalhöyük in southern central Turkey. But if you look at the stories of the Watchers, even though we might immediately think of them in terms of beings with wings, that's not how they were originally. This was created by the early Christians. The Watchers were originally wingless, but what's interesting is that there are various statements that suggest that they wore cloaks of feathers, they were birdmen, they could fly through the air like eagles. Very obviously shamans, in my opinion. So I said that there was an elite group of shamans that came into the area from somewhere else in the ancient world that kickstarted civilization, in what became the cradle of civilization, what became the Garden of Eden. This was the book From the Ashes of Angels, and that was published in 1996. And what I didn't know at the time was that the first spades were going into the ground at Göbekli Tepe. And when this was finally revealed to the world in the year 2000, I sort of looked at that and said, there you go. There's your your mother lode. There's your smoking gun of everything that I wrote in From the Ashes of Angels. Obviously, I wrote more about this subject, but was eventually able to go out to see these locations for the first time in 2004. I was there as part of a cultural festival. My book, From the Ashes of Angels, had now been published in Turkish, a matter which would eventually bring me great problems, but that's for another time. But I was allowed a driver, an interpreter to go around all these sites, and I went to Göbekli Tepe. I went to Haran. And once I was at Haran, these kids came up and wanted to show me this little local guidebook. And in it was a picture at the back of a T-shaped pillar from this site called Karahan Tepe. And it had this snake crawling up the front of it. And I looked at this and I thought, oh my God, this is obviously the same culture as Göbekli Tepe. Let's try and find this place. And so a couple of days later, I was in the Tek Mountains, which are about 25 miles southeast of Göbekli Tepe, looking for this place, and nobody seemed to know where the hell it was. But finally, just as we were about to give up, we spoke to a guy in Arab dress on a tractor, and he basically just pointed in a certain direction. We went over there. We came across this farmhouse, and a little lad came out, spoke to our interpreter, and pointed south at this big limestone hill. And as I got closer and closer to that, you started to see stone tools. And these stone tools got more and more and more the closer you got to the hill. Now, I'd seen something similar at Göbekli Tepe when I'd walked across to that, because at that time there were no roads to Göbekli Tepe. Um, and so I knew that I was getting close. And then eventually you start seeing pieces, right angled pieces of what they call porthole stones, which were probably the entrances into now lost enclosures, plus sticking out of the ground were dozens of T-shaped pillars, quite battered at the top of them, but quite clearly you were talking about the same type of enclosures at Göbekli Tepe. And I knew that underneath this soil and rubble somewhere was something that could potentially be as important as Göbekli Tepe. So I went back to Karahan Tepe on a great number of occasions between 2004 and 2018, exploring everywhere, every cave, every hill, every spot, making notes, doing articles, which are still available online. And then I finally heard that the place was going to be surveyed in 2018 by a group from the University of Istanbul, and they began excavations the following year, 2019, under the leadership of Professor Necmi Karol of Istanbul. And within 3 years, they'd uncovered the most extraordinary site, which I would say potentially is even more interesting than Göbekli Tepe. Not simply because that so much of it is coming out, very quickly. The archaeologists are working very fast, but also some of the structures are cut out of the bedrock in a way which we didn't see and haven't seen yet at Göbekli Tepe. And you're talking here, I mean, for instance, let's say about the pillar shrine structure AB, which is cut vertically down into the bedrock, leaving behind 10 pillars cut out the bedrock, plus on its west wall, the side facing into the hill, this huge, 3 times the normal size of a human head, sticking out of the wall on this long serpentine neck. This is just one of these enclosures. That there are others. There's other ones that are quite similar to Göbekli, but something incredible was going on here. Not only have you got the first rock architecture in human history, but it's clear that what was going on here in this remote location is far deeper, far darker, far further than what was going on at Göbekli Tepe. And that's why it's fascinated me since all of this was revealed in 2021. To me, you're looking at a lost city. I mean, I've described it basically as a lost city of the Anunnaki, and I'll stick with that for reasons which we can go into.
Yeah. I mean, it comes across in the book. It genuinely is astonishing. The different enclosures and aspects of the site that you go through are truly mind blowing. And I would agree that they do seem to surpass Göbekli Tepe in terms of actual architectural achievement and capability, but it does seem to have more of that ceremonial purpose to it, like demonstrable ceremonial purpose. Now you relate in the book a lot of this to a serpent featuring very heavily in possibly the kind of ceremonial use of the site. Could you talk to that?
Sure, yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, that the first ever T-shaped pillar that was found there had a big serpent along the side. Various others have now been found that also have got serpents all over them. There are serpents incised on bedges. There are serpents cut out of the bedrock, and even the pillar shrine itself may actually be the head, the three-dimensional head of a snake. And this came about because I was at Karahan a couple of years back, and one of the ladies afterwards, basically what we do tours out to Turkey twice a year, and obviously we're telling the tour guests about the sites, but then eventually we've said enough, and we say to them, "What do you think? What do you think?" Because we haven't got all the answers. All these sites are brand new. This is a learning process for everybody. What do you think? And one of the ladies said, "The pillar shrine." She said, looking down at the image of it from above, could it possibly be the head of a sperm, a human sperm, because you've got coming out of it this long, deep groove that's sort of trailing away from it. And at first, I thought about this for a moment, and then I thought, no, it can't possibly be, because the ancients, in theory, didn't have microscopes. So how could they possibly have known about, human sperms? And as I was just about to sort of move on, I suddenly thought, wait a minute, what if it's not a sperm, but the head of a snake, and the body of the snake is coming out the back, carved out of the bedrock? So I overlaid a particular species of snake known as the Anatolian meadow viper, which is indigenous to that area, very poisonous. It's still there to this day, and it fitted almost exactly. And and what was so weird about this is that only within the last year or so have they found the bones of this particular snake in profusion at a new enclosure which we call the kitchen, because it seems it's one of the places where they were preparing for the rituals and activity and whatever. So we know that these people were aware of this particular snake and were using it almost certainly within their rituals. So you have to say to yourself, well, what type of snake are we dealing with here? Well, if you look in the pillar shrine, this huge head is a human head on a serpentine neck. Now, I think this is what you might refer to as a snake genius. In other words, it's a snake with a human head. The reason why it's got a human head is because it's talking to you, and you can look at the head, and it's got like this oval shaped mouth that looks like it's open, and it looks like it's actually speaking to you. I mean, I've sat opposite it, and it's like it's trying to convey something to you. Now, if you're in an altered state of consciousness, I'm sure that it would be talking to you without any problem, and you would hear the message. So I believe that some kind of communications were taking place with some kind of snake. But what type of snake? Well, the first clue came shortly after I saw the overhead views of the enclosures that were discovered when I saw them in 2021 for the first time, because I realized that there are three interconnected shrines, what we call the Great Ellipse, the Pillar Shrine, and the Pit Shrine. The Pit Shrine's got this massive hole dug out of its center, almost looks like a sort of makeshift Flintstone style pool, or that you dive in and swim around in. It's very odd. That I realized that this last shrine, the Pit Shrine, seemed to be aligned towards the northwest, and I worked with an engineer by the name of Rodney Hale looking at its precise orientation, and we found that it was aligned perfectly to sunset on the midsummer solstice. Now, this would have been in approximately 9000 BC when it was constructed. Now, what that meant is that if you stood in this and you looked towards the horizon on this day, you would have seen the sun set. That's great in itself. It would be arguably one of the oldest, solar aligned, sites in the world. But there was more, because if you waited for 2 hours until the sun went down and darkness fell, you would have seen, standing at that exact same position where the sun went down, the Milky Way rising vertically up into the air. And at the exact spot on the horizon is what's known as the galactic bulge. Now, this is a bright area of the Milky Way, obviously the edge of our own Milky Way galaxy that we see in the sky. And in the past, it was much brighter, almost like a light bulb out there. And it was seen by various cultures as the head of a snake, with the rest of its body being the Milky Way itself. This is found in Vedic myth in India, in Mesopotamian myth, in Norse myth, in North American myth, in Mayan myth, and in South American myth as well. I mean, there are variations on how they interpret it, but for the most part, it's seen as a serpent in the sky. And this serpent is seen to encircle the Earth and exists within what is known as the cosmic ocean. And this is something that pre-exists our physical universe. And that something manifests within it, usually a pearl or an egg, that then breaks apart to form the physical constituents of our universe. The vaults of heaven, the physical world. But this in itself breaks into three parts to create the three different worlds, or the three different realms. These are the sky world, the middle world, and the lower world, or underworld, as we might like to call it. And this is, for instance, shown pictorially very well within Norse mythology. For instance, you have the Yggdrasil, the world tree, and you have around its sort of middle, Earth, Middle Earth. You have the roots going down into the underworld. You have the branches going up into the sky world, and surrounding all of it is the cosmic ocean, and within that is what's known as the Midgard serpent. And all of these components form part of this cosmogony, this creation or evolution of our universe. But it's there, seemingly, I think, at Karahan Tepe. And it's present also within the imagery and symbolism that we find at Göbekli Tepe. The most famous of the stones there is Pillar 43. So it's a T-shaped pillar, on the head of which you have a number of different animals, which I believe are sky figures. You have more of them on the stem as well, below the level of the head. And the most prominent sky figure on there is a vulture. This was identified as early as 2010 as Cygnus. At the same time, by a different archaeoastronomer, there's a big scorpion on there that almost certainly represents Scorpius. Well, when you overlay the skies of 9600 BC, when this pillar was created, everything falls into place. That the scorpion is Scorpius, the vulture is Cygnus, and you can make out other components. And above the wing of the vulture is this ball. This represents both the soul of an individual that's seen at the bottom of the pillar, that's headless because he's lost his head because he's dead. And secondly, it also represents the hole in the sky, which was a term in shamanic tradition for the point of exit of this world into the next world, into the sky world. And this was shown as like a ball or a hole. And this is basically what you have on Pillar 43. But above that, you have the famous man bags, as some of my colleagues like to call them. They see them perhaps as, the containers for drugs or something like that. But in my opinion, I don't think that's the case. I think that what they represent, that you have these rectangular sections with like these loops over the top, which are offside. And how many handbags have you seen with off-sided handles? None, obviously. Is that they represent the three worlds, the sky world, the middle world, and the lower world, and each of them has a little animal next to them that seems to symbolize that world. You have for the sky world, you have like a flamingo, like a wader bird. For the middle world, you have a leopard, a leaping leopard. And for the underworld, you have a toad or a frog, which is a universal symbol of the underworld. And this is contained within these chevrons going up and down all around it, which, in my opinion, represent the cosmic ocean. And you have like a coming from the head of the vulture across to another big wader bird, a series of squares, which I think represent some kind of bridge across water. Probably a stone bridge made of megalithic stones. I give examples of these in the book. So, in other words, this is a journey. This is a journey of the soul going from, from our perspective, the middle world into the sky world and showing what is even beyond the sky world. In other words, the whole of Pillar 43 is basically a mnemonic. It's a teaching device, probably for shamans, initiates, to, of what to expect when you enter into altered states of consciousness. This is what I see. And I think that you've got something similar going on at Karahan Tepe, where you have this snake that represents the world encircling serpent, which I think they were trying to communicate with using rituals which were probably quite similar to those that are still present with us in the world today. I mean, in Thailand, for instance, also in Haiti, there are gods that possess people and cause them to fall to the ground and become as snakes, writhing around on the ground. And if you want to see a more formalized type of communication with some kind of cosmic snake, look no further than Delphi in Greece, at the Delphic oracle. Now, the story in Greek myth there is that you would have a priestess known as the Pythia, or the oracle, who would sit upon a triangular or tripod-like seat, and the fumes from a dead serpent called the python would rise up and intoxicate her and allow the god Apollo to possess her. And once the god Apollo possessed her, then she would, give oracular pronouncements. But what's so interesting, as I show in the book, is that the form of Apollo that would appear to her was not like some, sky god or god of the sun, but a snake. I mean, you can see this very obviously from all the imagery surrounding the Delphic oracle, from ancient Greek vases, stuff like this, but also from the cult of Apollo and the way that people would communicate with Apollo, either through altered states or through dream incubation. The way that he would appear would be as a snake. So that's what I feel was going on, not just the Delphic oracle, but also at Karahan itself. And what was going on at Karahan, I think, was clearly much deeper, probably more rawer, that was, and more shamanic, of course. And why would they do this? Because they are trying to gain information from some kind of higher intelligence, a higher intelligence, which eventually, I think, becomes the Gnostic God, basically the Gnostic intelligence that's seen in the form of a snake or serpent, which is the representative of a much higher God, a God that exists in some kind of supernal realm, almost like an invisible sun, that creates the universe, but whose representative is a snake, is a serpent. It was known in Gnostic tradition as the good serpent, although there's a bad serpent, which I talk about as well, which I think is very important also. And that these ideas probably filtered through places like Haran, which is only a few miles away, really, from Karahan Tepe and also from Göbekli Tepe. And that these ideas filtered through Haran and became the basis of the Gnostic belief. And we know that various of the key Gnostic so-called Orphite, that's snake revering sects of the Gnostics, rose up in this very area of southeastern Turkey and just over the border in northern Syria. So we can look towards them, I think, for certain clues relating to what these practices were all about, how they affected the body, how these people believed that the snake that entered into their body and possessed them would rise up from their nether regions up through the body, through into the head, in exactly the same way that we know that in Vedic tradition, the Kundalini spirit rises up from the area of the navel, and the lower regions up through the body, through the different chakras to illuminate the individual. And I think that something similar was going on at Karahan Tepe.
Thank you. Uh, really, really riveting stuff. And you draw a lot of comparisons with the Yazidi culture and some of their focus on the black snake in their symbolism. Um, I mean, incidentally, like when you look at Yazidi and Gnostics and kind of some of the ideas of like a ruler of the earth, where like in Yazidi you have Malik Taus, Peacock Angel. Do do you think that there's similar things going on there with Karahan Tepe?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the area around Karahan Tepe, which is the Tek Mountains. I mean, this area in the past was very strongly associated with the Yazidi people. Um, and yeah, unfortunately, they were mostly forced out of Turkey throughout different phases in the 20th century. So very few of them still exist today. Most of them went to places like Armenia, but also obviously to Europe, to Germany, to Britain, I think even Australia. And so, obviously a lot of their ideas were preserved, but going all the way back to my book From the Ashes of Angels in 1996, I mean, I spent a lot of time in there talking about the relationship between the Yazidi beliefs and what we know of the early Neolithic beliefs of life and death and rebirth. And in particular, the importance of the bird as a soul bird, because the Yazidi, as you mentioned, venerate Malakatos, which is a peacock. It's also known as the peacock angel. Now, the connection with the peacock is probably quite late and probably due to Persian influence. The bird before that would seem to have been something else. I mean, they venerated it in the form of these like poles or sticks on top of which were a bird known as sanjak. I mean, each different region had its own sanjak. And when you look at these sanjaks and the birds on the top of them, they're clearly not peacocks. I mean, one potential identity was given as the bastard, and I'm not swearing there, which is a very large bird associated, with eagles and birds of prey. But I think that you can look at it going further back in time as almost certainly a memory of the importance of the vulture. The vulture was the key symbol of the soul. It acted as the psychopomp, the manner that the soul was taken from this world into the next and would then return, within the body of that bird, in the similar way that in Northern Europe, the stork or the swan was seen in exactly the same role. It would bring new souls into the world and it would take them out at the point of death. Bird migrations being an incredibly important element into these beliefs in life, death, and the afterlife. So, I talked about it then. I talked obviously also about the snake being a very important symbol to the Yazidis. I mean, for instance, on the side of every important tomb, shrine, temple is a black snake, a big black snake that's upright, and it's always kept polished. I mean, wherever you go, these black snakes are always polished. So, in other words, they have to be kept in pristine condition and not allowed to decay in any way. Now, when you actually ask a Yazidi person, what these mean, it's something I've done, repeatedly in southeastern Turkey. where, by the way, some Yazidis are returning after all the troubles in Syria and Iraq in 2014. And to be honest, they don't really know. There's a story about the snake representing, well, not representing, but in the story of Noah's Ark, it said that Noah's Ark sprang a leak, and that so as the Noah and his family and all the animals didn't die on the boat as it sank, the snake stepped forward and curled itself up and made a plug so that the boat could continue its journey. Now, this is just something that's probably told to children. I mean, this is clearly not the origin of the importance of this snake. But what comes closer to understanding it is the Yazidis who used to live in the area of Lake Van, which is in the extreme eastern part of Turkey, because there it represented the world encircling snake, what we've talked about as the Milky Way, with its head as the galactic bulge. And according to their tradition, the world encircling snake would forever chase its tail, just like the Ouroboros of a Greco-Egyptian tradition. And it was said that if ever the snake head caught up with the tail, the end of the world would come. Well, you've got important elements here. I mean, you've got the fact that this snake is cyclic, and it's in motion. It's in constant motion. So therefore, we're probably dealing with some kind of calendrical event, every year or every lunar cycle or whatever. But also you've got the idea that that a cataclysm can occur if everything goes wrong. In other words, if it catches up with its tail, there's something wrong. The cycle has gone out. Another cataclysm can take place, and certainly cataclysms, I think, are a major important feature in the development of Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, because they are constructed directly after a period known as the Younger Dryas, a 1200-year cold spell that was triggered almost certainly by a fragmenting comet around 10,800 BC. We call it the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And this almost certainly had a massive impact on the humans of the northern hemisphere, right the way down to the end of this mini ice age at 9,600 BC, when Göbekli Tepe was constructed. But so all of this is in the mix as far as what was going on at these sites, as much as 11,000 years ago.
And then one of the pieces that you talk about in the book as well is this fascinating alabaster bowl, and the kind of the encoded symbolism within the bowl, which I guess talks to the serpent and what you just described. Could you describe that for the listeners?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have very few artifacts from the Gnostic sects, the Orphite Gnostic sects, simply because these people were seriously persecuted by the Church of Rome in the early centuries of the Christian era in late antiquity. And of course, anything that they were doing was destroyed. Plus, also, they would have kept secret their activities. So, they may have had to disguise a lot of the paraphernalia that they used in rituals as more Christian or Catholic in nature. But one item that we have got, which is almost certainly something that was used in Gnostic rituals, is this bowl. It's about that big, and it has 16 naked individuals that are fanned out like the spokes of a wheel, with their feet towards the center. Now, there are some male and some female. Each of them have got their hands in different positions, almost as if this itself is significant and has a meaning in its own right. But in the center is this like radial sun, and on the top of that is this sort of coiled dragon. It's got little wings that clearly represents the good serpent in Gnostic tradition. And radiating out from this sun are these other, like, lines coming off of it, 32 in all, that go beneath the human individuals. Obviously, two for each person, making 32. And I trace as best I can the origins of this item to an area of northern Syria, not far from the city of Shanlerfa and Haran, which is where we know that various Gnostic sects of an Orphite nature were developing in the early years of the Christian era. So it's probably connected with one of those. But the symbolism in it is very, very, very interesting, because what I show is that the numbers 16 and 32 um, crop up again and again in connection with illumination through Gnostic and also Vedic, Kundalini stroke, yogic stroke, tantric means in Vedic tradition, and that there seems to be a relationship between the two, these Vedic traditions and these Gnostic traditions of the Middle East, both of which talk in terms of a snake coming up inside you and possessing the body, but not in a sort of a way where you would lose, all consciousness, but in a way which would bring, like gnosis, illumination, deep understanding of the source of creation, beyond the snake itself, which was the servant, the representative, the son, son, of this cosmic intelligence that was seen almost like a sort of supernal or invisible sun existing out there somewhere beyond the physical universe. Now, a lot of these ideas are not necessarily mine. I mean, they are from scholars that have looked into Gnostic and Vedic traditions. What I have done is brought them together and show the comparisons that are there for the very first time. Not that obviously others have not seen, the link between Vedic tradition and yogic practices, tantra and Gnosticism. Clearly, this has been something that's been there since the beginning of the 20th century, but it needed to be explored in a much fuller manner, and that's something that I've tried to achieve in this book. But obviously, the reasons for bringing all of this out are twofold. Firstly, I believe that they originally came from these, early Neolithic sites like Karahan Tepe, and I use Karahan more so than Göbekli, and I'll tell you for why. Because, when I go to Göbekli, I see this as more like a cathedral, a Catholic cathedral. And what I mean by that is, you've got high altars, you've got lots of chapels and shrines, probably dedicated to different totems, clan totems, and things like this, different animals, just in the same way that the chapels and shrines of a cathedral would be dedicated to the Virgin Mary, certain saints, and whatever. It's a place for pilgrims to come. Whereas I think that what was happening at Karahan Tepe is, as I've already said before, far deeper, darker, rawer. And I think that what was going on there can be compared to almost like a sort of Gnostic, a secret Gnostic temple in a way, not necessarily in size, but just in the feel of what was going on, that these people were into something much darker, in my opinion. I think that they were trying to find answers, ontological answers, that to like who we are, where do we come from, what is out there, can we find out, can we connect with it, can we bring this knowledge back into our world, can it help us develop, can it help us with innovations and technology, can these spirits guide us?
Andrew, it's been a real pleasure to have you back on the show, and congratulations again on the book. I hugely enjoyed it. It's the best book I've read in a long time. Fascinating, truly exciting. Like I get overly excited by these ancient ruins. They genuinely are just capture my imagination. So thank you for putting out a fabulous book. And what's next for you? You got anything else coming up?
Yeah, I've spent far too long on Stonehenge in the last year. Um, three different aspects of it. Firstly, the altar stone there. Uh, I mean, it's always been known as the most exotic stone there. New evidence suggests it came from northeastern Scotland, is connected with
Oh, well.
the grooveware culture of the Orkney Islands. So I've been writing all about that, also writing about it as a sonic temple and as a role model, not role model, a model of the universe in its guise as a dodecahedron, which brings us into some cutting edge science to do with the
Mhm.
cosmic microwave background, the idea that the universe may not be flat and infinite, as has always been assumed, but finite and curved into the shape of a dodecahedron. Um, I'm going to be working on a book relating to that. The actual article on the Orkney Stone is just about to drop.
Mhm.
I'm going to do that in the next day or so. And yeah, I mean, obviously we've got tours coming up. If you're interested in coming with us to Turkey, we do it twice a year. I say we, it's
Mhm.
me and Hugh Newman, JJ Answorth, as part of the Megalithomania team. We're going out May and September next year. Um, we're also going to Peru and Bolivia and Easter Island next
Mhm.
November if you're interested. I mean, and all the information relating to these can be found on my website,
Mhm.
andrewcollins.com, andrewcollins.com,
Mhm.
all as it sounds. Yeah, please follow me on social media, Instagram, X, and obviously Facebook and YouTube, put stuff out on there.
Mhm.
And as far as getting the book is concerned, clearly you can get it at any good online bookstore, most obviously Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And yeah, I mean, if you've got any questions about anything I've said, you want to communicate with me, there's an email address on the opening page of the website.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure having you on the Spirit Box.
Thank you. Cheers. Cheers, Doc.
No, really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I hope you all enjoy that. I've found it utterly fascinating. The book is superb. It's so rich. It's so well researched. Um, yeah, give it a read. I really recommend it. Okay, that is it from me. Take care and talk soon.